Item 2 of the agenda, the format of the council meeting. Can we refer to page 1 to 6 of the supplementary agenda, which comprises a report setting out some options for the format and structure of the council meetings for the remainder of the current municipal year? Can I invite the officers to take us through the key issues, please?
Thanks, Chair. If you recall, at the last council meeting, this was asked for, a session of this committee, in terms of looking at the format for the councils going forward to the end of the municipal year in reality, and also clarity for the meeting on the 8th. The Mayor and Leaders Group met, I think it was 2 weeks ago, discussed some options, and this is what the paper is basically based on. The first being that for items where there's no disagreement and covers like what the usual 1 to 5 items on the agenda, where they usually just go through on the nod. We have this session of Constitutional Issues Committee for other members to raise issues and look at maybe getting a one resolution to just pass the lot if there's no dissension. So we'll take some time out of that sort of items on the agenda. So that's the first bit. Secondly, which was the main discussion between the leaders of the groups and the Mayor, was to ensure that we have at least 2 thematic or big debates on the night, which again can be discussed at the Mayor Leaders meeting prior to the council summons, and maybe something the leaders agree on. And then the last bit in terms of the discussion was about the motions for debate. There's various views from the leaders of the numbers of motions and the allocation. So I think that would probably be, I would have thought, the lion's share of some of the discussions of how many motions we have, based on an allocation for, each time, like a time slot, so we can work up a standing order for length of speeches, etc. And then there's, there's one last bit in the note which was raised by Councillor Kemp directly, which is about reintroducing supplementary questions, the questions that have written responses. There's just a note in the report that says you need to think about that in terms of practical considerations. The reason we removed it, when you end up with a lot of questions on a council evening, say you ended up with 20, if you end up with 20 supplementary questions, that's going to be at least half an hour to 45 minutes to have them answered on the evening. So again, just some considerations. Most of it coming to this Constitutional Issues Committee before the summons goes out for councils for members, 20 members to turn up to have a discussion on the items. We might have some amendments to them, but we could move them on block to take out some time allocated for those items. 2 thematic debates that come through the Mayor and Leaders, and then how many motions for debate and the allocation of those motions to the groups and what that would mean in terms of the time allocation as well. Thank you, Chair.
So I think Chris has broken it down into sort of 4 items there. What we've got is this part 1 where it's the constitutional issue. So if you have a look at page 2, what we've got is the petition statement, written questions, mayoral recommendations, reports submitted to the council, and then the changes in committee membership. So I think the idea is to move that as one block rather than each individually moved. Is there any comments on that? No. Okay, so the part 2 really is about the main discussion, which is the 2 themed debates. And I think if we can have a look at section 3.6 there on page 3. So this one for the 8th of December meeting, I think this is it's going to be the boundary review and the strategic improvement plan. Is there any comments from members on that part?
Hi, yes, thank you. Just one thing that I think perhaps we need to be considering moving towards more motions more motions to debate within our council meetings. I think sometimes the thematic debates can be sort of stifling in a sense, because we might not then be able to discuss the really pressing urgent matters that might arise. So if we stick to a model of just thematic debates forevermore, that could really hinder our progress as a council. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I think the idea is that we have sort of a hybrid. We have the thematic debate and a mixture of motions to sort of try and balance that out. Is there any other comment or questions? Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, Thanks. I'll just respectfully just have a different view, actually, Stephanie, in the sense I actually think when we had the themed council meeting on the climate emergency, probably the best council meeting that I've had in my 13 years as a councillor. I thought it actually kind of brought us together in a very strategic sense and actually kind of discussed things in wider than just individual standpoints. And I think that kind of effect, as Ruth just said, of us having a hybrid where we'll have thematic debates up front, but then there'll still be the ability to have contemporary motions. I think it's the right mix, actually. So I think we're trying to balance both out. So I'd kind of strongly support what we're proposing here with thematic debates. I think that can give full council a really good strategic look at the big issues that are affecting everyone in our city.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
Just to add, one of my Green colleagues has requested that I put this forward, and just to consider that perhaps any agreement might be just for the next meeting and not for the long term. But yeah, so I'm just putting that forward.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear that. What was the? Sorry, Chris.
Is it Councillor Pitcher's?
Yeah.
Yes. So Councillor Pitcher suggested that this proposal where we have this hybrid is just for the next meeting. So I think just for the December the 8th meeting and not for the February meeting.
It's a matter for yourselves. We can put a note to the council on the 8th saying suspend stands and orders. It's been agreed by CIC. This is the format. You'll have to know that in advance as groups anyway to put your motions in and know the number of motions you've got. But again, you can either do it for this meeting and then say it's worked well. We'll meet again before the next meeting, roll the process forward, or you can just move it. That should be the programme going forward. It's a matter for yourselves as the committee. We can do whatever you ask, in other words.
If open up to that suggestion for any other comments, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but equally, I think we should be. I mean, Liam made the point that it's one of the best meetings he's ever had. It's just a satellite that he's got, I suppose. But in terms of we've got, there's going to be two meetings, isn't it, between now and whenever. So my view is dead simple. Try the two out and then bring it back and have a discussion, have a debate then. Because I think that's it's the proof of the pudding, isn't it? No, if we got, I would go with two. We've had one. There's three. We can have that discussion about three, and more importantly, we can get the feedback in from the wider groups about how they feel and how they don't feel and whatever. So it can give a subject for debate for this future committee.
Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board what Councillor Pitchers has said, and in terms of it will be premature, we're discussing this, and to effectively see if it's a good way going forward, we need to give it several instead of what, we're going back and we haven't reviewed it. So I do agree that we can look at it, review it, but not, we're going to do it December and then revert back. That's not effectively reviewing how beneficial it is. Thank you.
Councillor Kushner.
So just in terms of what council meetings we've got left, so there's the December one, which is boundary and strategic improvement plan. February, isn't that budget?
Yeah, we're probably going to have a meeting at the end of January as well. My sitting here, I think you've got 4 meetings from here, 8 and 3 next year. So one of them's the budget, though. Yeah.
So it's probably 2 outside. So there's the one coming up, then there's another 2, and then the budget. So we're talking about what we do for 2 meetings, aren't we? Really? 3, including the budget. But the budget's the budget one, isn't it? So I would agree with Councillor Hanson.
Okay, I think probably the only any other comments, and probably the only fairest way to put it to the vote really, and just see by a show of hands who, if we accept Councillor Pitcher's suggestion, or we have this as.
Okay, you have to move it as an amendment. Chair, are you moving what's in the paperwork, because there's a bit at the end you just need to iron out around motions. So just in terms of what the committee have agreed.
Okay, if we go into the part 3, which Chris referred to, was the format of motions. So that's the number and the allocations. If we have a look at page 3, the current situation. So that's without the hybrid and the themed without the themed debates, is that we currently have arrangements for 1 motion for the mayor, 5 motions for the ruling group, and 1 motion for the opposition. Are there any comments from members? Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. I think if we look at the allocation there, 5 motions for the ruling group and 1 motion to the opposition. Whereas if we look at the number of councillors, there's 70 Labour and 20 opposition groups, which is 3.5 to 1. And I would suggest, or even propose, that that would be better served by having the ratio 4 to the ruling group and 2 to the opposition groups. 1 motion being to the main opposition group and the other motion being rotated around the smaller opposition groups. Thanks, Chair.
You can ask Councillor Maloney, do you know what that percentage is? So what's the ratio on that then?
Well, the ratio on that would be 4 to 2 plus, yeah, right. Well, that would be 67 or 66.66 recurring to the Labour group and 33.33 to the opposition groups. But that doesn't take into account the mayor's motion as well, which skews the figures slightly. And work that out if you want, Chair.
Is there any other comments, please, Councillor Pitchers?
Yes, I'd just like to support what Councillor Maloney has said. I think that that is a good model to follow. Thank you.
One of the reasons, or one of the discussions for the number of motions, is we've got to make space on the agenda for the 2 thematic debates. So if you're going back to 6 motions, you only had 7 originally, which is with the mayor's motion. What was raised during the leaders' session was 2 of those thematic debates, one of those thematic debates could be the mayor's motion, 2 Labour motions, and whether there's going to be 2 opposition motions on the basis of what Councillor Maloney said. But all I'm indicating, if it's going to end up 6 motions at the end, and you're probably looking at, I was looking before, maybe 1 hour and 10 or 15 minutes, they're going to be quite quick motions, i.e. in 15 minutes, if it's 2 or 3 minute speeches, you've got 4 or 5 people that can speak. I just raised that as a practical issue.
Councillor Kushner.
Right, I'm confused now. So, in terms of the number of motions that were at the moment, we've got the mayor's motion, 5 from the ruling party and 1 from the opposition. That's 7. If we move to thematic, then what you were saying, how many are we talking about? Number of motions within the thematic debate, and then additional motions on top of that.
One was just around the mayor's motion, so you take that off the table. Is the mayor's motion could be one of the thematic debates. You'd for me craft it as a motion from the mayor, which the leaders support, and that's I think what we did for climate change motion that went to council. So you're talking, well, basically 6 or 4 in reality from the proposals.
So sorry, Chair. So that would mean then so in terms of the time, then we're extending the time within the mayor's motion to accommodate a debate, a thematic debate.
The mayor's motion always had 30 minutes. Yeah, so you're probably extending that bit for the thematic, but it wouldn't just be the mayor's motion. It'd come through the mayor and leaders group as one of the thematic debates for the night. So it's crafting it in that way. The issue is time allocation. At the end of the agenda is going to be the motions. And, it's a numbers game about what you'd allocate. And that's what we're saying. How you allocate them is one issue to which groups, when they put motions in. We'll have the whips meeting before we meet at council in terms of those cross-party support, etc. It's just about me and Michael being clear from this committee what's the allocation, the number of motions you want debated, up for debate, and the allocation to the groups. And then we'll have to put a time allocation to it in some way.
So, I mean, because when we had the thematic debate last time, we had a number of, if I remember right, that we had a number of motions around the same theme, didn't we? as part of the thematic debate. So is that, so we're not talking about, we're not proposing doing that this time?
So I think when if I remember when we had the themed debate, it was on, correct me if I'm wrong, it was on, say, climate change, but within that it was broken down into about 4 things, which then in itself had motions. Okay, so this is a different structure as I understand it, which is a hybrid. So we have 2 themed debates based upon motions, I'm assuming, and then a section, another part of the council where it is for open motions. Now, I mean, if we're looking around, say, proportionality, if we include a mayor's motion, and then another suggestion, for example, would be a mayor's motion, 2 main group motions, and then 1 from the opposition. So that would, I think if we work out on a percentage terms in terms of proportionality, the opposition works out as 22% of the number of councillors, and then that would leave, so sort of 75% for the main group, including the mayor's motion, and then 25% of the motions for the opposition, which is the closest maybe to proportionality. So that's another suggestion we could move. But is there any other comment?
So can I just clarify, please, because I've got confused now. So are there going to be additional motions for the thematic debates?
We're calling them thematic debates, but I'd rather call them key debates. So for the 8th of December, they're not motions. There's a discussion on the boundary review. It's going to be a big debate. And the discussion on the strategic improvement plan. Should be a debate from the commissioners. So we're calling them thematic debates. I think it's not going to be the same. It could be, as we had with climate change, but it's something the Mayor and Liaison agreed we need to discuss this. It could actually come from a report, which is obviously the boundary review, that we want to allocate time on the night for a debate in council to give members opportunity to speak, and have input. We're getting hung up on the word thematic debate, and Barry's right, we had 4 motions that helps construct the framework for that discussion, but it's more about allocating time to two key debates, I'd call them, on thematic.
Councillor Kushner.
Yeah, just come in terms of the debating allocation, I don't think we should change the allocation. I think the mayor's motion is separate to the rest of the council, because obviously the mayor doesn't sit on council. And I think the rest of it breaks down at about, I've just worked it out, if you want to do 77.777%, which is our share of the seats at the moment, then that's around 4.6% of the debates. But if you round it up, it's 5. I mean, if you want to work in proportion, I don't think we should change the proportion. I think we should stay at 5 from the ruling group and 1 from the oppositions.
Is there any other comment? I mean, I could only see in the problem with that is we're going to have the 2 key debates, then potentially another 7 motions. So how long is roughly a motion debated?
Allocation currently for the mayor's motion is 30 minutes, for the other 6, 20 minutes. So what's that? 2.5, 3, just on 3 hours. That's the 2 key debates, and some of the items at the front end we're going to try and do in 15 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes is the pitch to make space for the key debates.
So let's break this down. For that first section, it's 15 minutes.
We'll try and do that if everyone's in agreement. We might have amendments to some of that paperwork. Yeah.
Okay, and each key debate is what?
Allocated the time because I don't know how many motions. There's one that agreed to have debated on the night. So it's a case of trying to allocate the time. If you give us indication of the allocation, we usually work to a 5 till 8 o'clock finish. That's what's been a pattern for quite a number of years. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. That's usually been the framework, 3 hours.
At the number of motions that we currently have, that's 2.5 hours, plus 2 key debates, plus the 15 minutes at the start. So it depends how long those key debates last. If they take an hour each, we're there for 4.5 hours. Pardon? Nearly 5 hours. Sorry, Liam.
Yeah, I think that, to be honest, the time point is key. I always think any kind of meeting, any walk of life that goes beyond 2 hours starts to lose its effectiveness. Now, obviously, there will be times when we need to be there longer than 2 hours, don't get me wrong. Personally, I would rather have more council meetings with a tighter agenda that we can actually have a more effective debate around than having something that potentially goes on for 5 hours. And bear in mind, for all the right reasons, to actually allow people that have got employment responsibilities and other kind of caring responsibilities, we have evening meetings. Now, if we were having something that potentially goes on from 5 till 10 o'clock at night every couple of months, that's a pretty kind of marathon effort. I suppose for me, I would hope the thematic debates actually become the key part of the meeting, and whether they kind of conclude with some form of motion or some form of report, it would be nice to actually conclude them with some form of kind of vote and council's agreement or not to something. But I don't think you've got to be looking at a reduction in the actual number of motions that follow just to make the meeting effective, because otherwise you could end up with going quite late into the evening before we ever get on to the individual contemporary motions. I think we've just got to think about the time management to make sure that effective meetings accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, so probably following on from Liam. I think when we look at select committees, we urge people to try to conclude within 2 hours. I think Liam's spot on. After 2 hours, you start losing the will to live and the concentration. For meetings to be done to 5 hours, it's just ridiculous. We have lots of councillors who have done a full day's work before they come to council meeting. So you're looking at a 12, 13 hour day, notwithstanding the travel time. I know you can do it, Ruth, but that's notwithstanding the travel time. What about family commitments? You're missing your kid for the day or the kids for the day and whatever. So I think really, we should be looking at reducing the amount of time spent on whether it's thematic debates or emotions or whatever. If it's saying 20 minutes for the motion, well, perhaps we should be looking at less motions or less time for the motions. I think it's just ridiculous expecting anybody to do a 5 hour meeting. I don't think it's healthy. I think if you ask some professional advice from medical people, they would tell you it's absolutely stupid. But that's just a personal opinion.
Councillor Pitchers.
I just wanted to clarify about the idea of a hybrid meeting. So if we had the 2 thematic debates, and I suppose that's what we are talking about, would we then still have the 7 motions to debate on top of the 2 thematic debates, or would that then reduce the amount of motions that are debated within a council meeting?
I think that's sort of what we're trying to, the point we're trying to get to. So there's we've had suggestion from Councillor Maloney, which I think was sort of 4 for the main group, 2 for the opposition, which is only a reduction to 6. I put forward, so Mayor's motion incorporated into the one of the key debates, then 2 for the main group and 1 for the opposition, which would take us down to make 3 for, it would be 3 plus the 2 key debates. Can I bring Councillor Nicholas in, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think what we need to consider as well, there may be amendments. So if we're looking at, and it's not like we're trying to stifle debate or scrutiny, but we need to take time in consideration. And I agree with Councillor Robinson, because personally, my day starts from 7 in the morning. And if we're looking at an additional 5 hours, not taking into consideration if there are amendments. So basically, I'll be working from 7 to 11 because, council meeting starts at 5. So give or take 5 to 6 hours. So, you know, is it practical? You know, what level or quality of contributions when people are quite tired? And there are lots of people who have carers responsibility. Would that put people off? So, you know, so it's taking those things into consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
So, Councillor Kushner.
Right, so, okay, I'm trying to count the numbers. I wasn't suggesting having 5-hour meetings, by the way. I was, I thought what we were saying was half an hour for the mayor's motion would be turned into a debate. If I understood it correct, so that'd be half an hour. Then if there were 6 motions, that'd be 2 hours. So that'd be 2.5 hours. And then 15 minutes for the other bits of business. Or have I misunderstood something there? Or is there another debate as well?
Sorry. I said that we'll call them key debates or the thematic debates that we decide. So let's visualise the 8th of December, the boundary review report. I get 15, 20 members want to speak. Yeah. So, you know, on the night, I don't know if we have the same for the SIP, but it's about structuring the meeting for the best benefits of the members. So it's not classing it in terms of a 30-minute mayor's debate, because those 2 aren't motions, the 2 reports that are going to come to council. So it's just about getting the best value out of a council meeting when you've got members present. I think that's what we're trying to construct. And I'll make this last point about motions. We have 8 select committees. We have an audit committee that's being reconstituted in a different way. We have an ethics and standards committee as well. So we have 10 committees that meet in the cycle. Any member can put items to any select committee of those 8 and have them debated. So we have a lot of meetings that take place where motions can be presented. I understand the City Council's the sovereign body and it's the key meeting in the structure, but there are other avenues to have a motion debated, other pigeonholes or meetings.
Okay, Councillor Clark, please.
So given that it's been suggested that we just trial this, if we're having the thematic debates, I think it might be better to try what you've suggested, Ruth, with the or Councillor Bennett, with the mayor in the thematic section, and then 2 for the leading group, and 1 for the opposition, just to see how it pans out. We're not talking about it going on if it doesn't work, but it, you know, we could see how it kind of pans out.
Of course, Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. I don't disagree with what's been said about the meetings going on for too long. And I think in modern days, 5 hours would be considered a very long meeting. If we look at the council cycle, it is something that has increased over the years. I mean, certainly when I was first on the council 20 years ago, it was shorter. And originally, and for many, many years, it was a monthly cycle. And I suspect what's happened is that as the council cycle has actually lengthened, more meetings and more committees have been created to fill in that gap so that it's reasonably full. But I think the problem we've got now is with such a long cycle, events can come and go, and the council doesn't have time to respond. And what I'm saying here really, is this something that we can fix easily, or is it a massive shift to try and contract the council cycle and contract the number of committees? And would that give a more coherent and effective council structure? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other comment on this bit? Councillor Pitchers.
I just wanted to remind members that motions that are passed at full council meetings do hold a lot more weight than motions that are debated and passed in select committees. So that's just a point to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the last part was about the reintroduction of sort of supplementary questions. So we've got main written questions, and then I think the request there was for anybody a councillor who puts forward a written question have the opportunity to ask supplementary questions. Is there any comment from members on that part? Councillor Maloney first.
Thanks, Chair. I do think that would be a very helpful thing, on the basis that sometimes perhaps the administration might be reluctant to comprehensively answer a question, and it does give the questioners the opportunity to push and challenge. So I would welcome that.
Councillor Kushner.
I think it needs to be time limited. I think that if there could be 15 questions with supplementaries, I think yeah, there could be the opportunity for supplementary questions, but it needs to be time limited, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thanks very much. Whilst in theory it sounds great, in practice I'm a little bit sceptical, and I'll tell you kind of why. First and foremost, I remember when we had it in place beforehand, about a decade ago, you'd actually spend that slot of the council meeting with lots of people jumping up and down going, no supplementary, Lord Mayor, and all that kind of pantomime. So it didn't actually kind of cut the mustard on that level. The other aspect is that, to be honest, it felt quite staged. That kind of there would be an official question and an official response, and then there'd either be kind of a staged question to try and embarrass the administration, or a staged question to try and bull up the administration. It felt a bit like pantomime. So that's why I'm sceptical about it, because I actually think in terms of the scrutiny side of things, where you can get a better kind of transparency and accountability is at the select committee stage. Because if you want to ask an individual cabinet member or the mayor a kind of detailed question in advance, you can do that and get the detailed answer from the council, and then follow that up with a supplementary. But more fundamentally, in terms of better scrutiny, you can actually ask a question of the mayor or the cabinet member without that prior warning of the written question, and then follow it up with supplementary questions. I think that's much better scrutiny, if I'm honest with you, because it's not staged, and actually it can hold the administration to account in what I think is a thorough way. So in principle, I can understand why this is being suggested. I just think in practice, actually, it's better dealt at that kind of more granular select committee level.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
I'm just amazed that Councillor Maloney kept a straight face when he kept his contribution in. We can all remember the supplementary questions, and I think the phrase you were looking for, Liam, is like Fred Carnot circus. It was an absolute joke. It was an embarrassment to what was supposed to be professional and stuff that we do. You get your answers to your questions in written form prior to the council meeting, and if you're not happy with it or you want more information, just write to the individual who gave you the answer. And that can be, I don't know when you get the answer to the question, 2 days, 3 days before the council meeting, a week, what is it? I don't know. But for me, if the answer to the question I asked wasn't what I'm looking for, I'd be on my email immediately, writing back to that individual, say, look, can you clarify, because I don't understand this, or I want this, I want that, or whatever. That is actually being a bit professional. And perhaps that the Councillor Kemp doesn't want to appear to be professional. He just enjoys the Fred Carnot circus that was during the last time we used the supplementary question. So, Chair, I would not be supporting this in 1,000 years.
Thank you. Any other members wish to comment? Councillor Brown. It's been a long day.
Sorry, I'm not even sure if I'm on this committee or not at the moment anyway. So, yeah, I take some of the points that have been made, but I think coming back to an earlier point that Pat made before is that events change, and I think that if you put in a question and an event then changes after, I think it's an important point to then be able to follow it up. I mean, look, I've had previous questions in full council where I've had simple answers to it. You ask a question and all I've got is the word yes or the word no. I wonder if there's an easier way of kind of, or a middle ground that we can kind of get around this, rather than simply members getting up and saying no supplementary, or as you say, you think it may look staged. Whether we can actually ask in advance, you know, you've got 5 days or whatever before council. If you have a supplementary, you need to let committee clerk know. Then at least the cabinet member knows that there is a supplementary coming, even if they're not kind of just surprised by it just on the day. But I do think the idea of having supplementary questions is there, because fine, you could say, you know, you might just get an answer to a question that just says yes or no, and then it refers back to the select committee, and you get exactly the same answer. There's got to be a process, I think, of being able to get a further answer to those questions when those written questions aren't sufficient.
Carry on.
One thing you could do, rather than allocating time in the agenda, if the member wants a supplementary to what they've asked, Councillor, you can write to the officer directly, but if you wanted to go to a meeting, the answers are given from cabinet members. Cabinet members will attend a various select committee or individual select committee. Maybe a supplementary question might be posed to that if the member has it, because members can put questions to those committees. So we still get the response in a meeting. That could be one suggestion. I think what we tried to make clear in the report, it's about, Councillor Robinson said 2 hours and so is Johansson, is when you get to 3 hours, if you've had 20 questions and 20 supplementary questions, that's going to take up about at least 40 minutes. And when you allocate 15 minutes, which ones do you pick? So is it the first come, first served? So how do you allocate who has the 15 minutes?
Is there any other comment from members? No, right. We've got a number of issues really to decide before us now. So I'm going to hand over to Mike to sort of break down how we're going to deal with that.
Thank you, Chair. Broadly, the report divides into two separate substantive issues. The first one being looking at the 3 different sections of council itself, which you've explored in some detail, and the substantive sticking point appears to be around the actual number of motions allocated for part 3 of debate and the amount of time then allocated for those motions. Now, the Chair's indicated during her comments during debate that the Chair's minded to move a particular position, potentially, for example, of the Mayor's motion being dealt with under thematic, then 2 motions for Labour and 1 for the opposition. The Chair obviously may exercise discretion otherwise, and Councillor Pitchers has indicated a different position, as indeed as Councillor Maloney. So that deals with the aspect in terms of the 3 sections of council itself. Secondly, we have a separate vote to conduct in relation to the matter of potential supplemental questions. And as you've just rehearsed between you, there's 2 diametrically opposed views on this. The one being that obviously it's an opportunity for on-the-night direct scrutiny accountability by the executive. The other one being that a more formal, clear, written procedure following up and enhancing the existing written response procedure is more appropriate, and indeed ensures that we don't lose a considerable allocation of time to otherwise a to and fro on question responses. And again, those are the 2 separate issues we need to look at. So I'd invite the Chair firstly to return to the issue of the 3 sections of full council, and the Chair to move a particular motion in terms of specifically whether how many meetings we wish to apply this trial to, be it 1 or 2. I think 2 was the consensus which was arrived at. And then the Chair to propose a suggestion in terms of how many motions be included under part 3, the motions debate, and to potentially give an indication as to the time allowed for each of those motions. Thank you.
Okay, so I think Councillor Pitcher's suggestion was that we have this for just 1 meeting, and then so if we can, and I think then the other suggestions really was that we leave it till the end of the cycle. I summarise that correctly?
Yeah, so that agreements made about full council meetings during this committee meeting regarding the hybrid model will only stand for the next Liverpool City Council meeting in December.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, take a vote on that.
I would suggest it may be easier and clearer for everyone concerned if we just conduct 2 simple votes. So I would suggest, Chair, picking up the points raised, that what you may want to move is obviously move a position as Chair dealing with the 3 different sections and propose For example, as Chair, you've indicated the trial applied to the next 2 council meetings. Councillor Pitchers would then move an amendment to apply it to only 1.
Okay, so as chair, if I move the proposal that the hybrid model applies to the remainder of the council meetings except the budget meeting in this municipal year, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I would suggest also that you incorporate within your motion by way of assistance how many motions you're proposing to allocate to debate as well, so we can deal with it as 2 simple votes.
And then the second part of that is then that I move that the mayor's motion be incorporated into one of the key debates. The 2 motions are for the main group and 1 motion for the opposition group. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, just to tease out a little bit further, the actual time allocated for the motions, I think would be beneficial also to include. Obviously, you're familiar at the moment that the motions are allowed 20 minutes each. So if we've got 3 here, an hour for the motion section of debate would seem sensible. Everyone's comfortable with that?
Okay, then further move that each, the time allowed for motions is 1 hour.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Councillor Pitchers and Councillor Maloney, would you wish to move any form of amendment to the Chair's motion, please? Thank you.
So first of all, I would like to have an amendment that says that agreements about the full council meeting made during this committee meeting will only stand for December's meeting so that we can trial it. Also about the makeup of the motions in part 3, I think it would be quite fair and reasonable to have the mayor's motion within the thematic debate as suggested before, 1 Labour group motion, 1 Liberal Democrat motion, and then 1 motion for the remaining opposition.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
I'll second that, Chair.
You're not going to move your own amendment? No.
Thank you. We